January 28, 1945. Yelnya, Soviet Union. A 20-year-old Soviet sniper died from wounds sustained during battle near the town's outskirts. By this point, Roza Shanina had eliminated 59 German soldiers. While this might seem like an impressive achievement for a seasoned veteran, Shanina had only been a sniper for 16 months. Her rise from a novice to one of the most successful snipers in the Soviet Red Army occurred against the backdrop of the Soviet Union's push to turn the tide on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union's sniper program had been developing since the early days of the war. However, it was individuals like Shanina, with her short but intense career, that would prove the effectiveness of snipers in shifting the battlefield's dynamics. Shanina's death at such a young age marked both the end of a promising life and the peak of the Soviet sniper program's impact on World War II. April 3, 1924. Arkhangelsk Region, Soviet Union. Roza Shanina was born into a working-class family in the remote northern territories, far from the centers of power and the front lines that would later define her life. Her childhood unfolded in the rural landscape of Edma village, where the harsh climate and simple living conditions shaped the resilience that would serve her in combat. The family home was modest, heated by a traditional Russian stove, and Shanina grew up alongside her siblings in an environment where education was valued despite limited resources. By 1941, Shanina had moved to Arkhangelsk City to pursue her studies at a pedagogical school, training to become a kindergarten teacher. Official Soviet education records from the Arkhangelsk Pedagogical Institute document her enrollment and her academic focus. She excelled in her studies and demonstrated a particular aptitude for working with children. Her diary entries from this period reveal a young woman deeply committed to education and community service, with no indication that military service was part of her life plan. June 22, 1941, changed everything. Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, and the Soviet Union was suddenly at war. Radio broadcasts crackled through Arkhangelsk with news of the invasion. Soviet citizens gathered in public squares to hear Stalin's address on July 3rd, calling for total mobilization. The initial German advances were catastrophic. Soviet forces suffered approximately 400,000 casualties in the first weeks alone, according to Soviet military archives. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. By 1942, the war had reached a critical phase. The Battle of Stalingrad, lasting from August 1942 to February 1943, became a turning point. Soviet casualties during this single battle exceeded 1 million soldiers. The nation faced an existential threat. Every available resource, every capable person was needed. Women began volunteering for military service in unprecedented numbers. Soviet records show that approximately 800,000 women served in the Red Army during World War II, with many in combat roles. Shanina made her decision in this context. In December 1941, at 17 years old, she attempted to enlist. Military commissariats initially rejected female volunteers for combat roles, directing them instead to auxiliary positions such as medical services, communications, or administrative duties. Shanina persisted. She wrote multiple letters to military authorities, arguing for her right to serve in a combat capacity. Her persistence, documented in Soviet military recruitment files, reflected a broader pattern among Soviet women who sought active roles in defending their homeland. Finally, in 1943, as Soviet losses mounted and the need for skilled marksmen grew acute, Shanina's application was accepted. She was assigned to the Central Women's Sniper Training School, established specifically to train female snipers. The school, located near Podolsk, operated under the command of the Soviet Main Directorate of Combat Training. Historical records indicate that over 1,000 women graduated from this institution during the war, producing some of the most effective snipers in Soviet military history. While women's combat roles were often dismissed by some military traditionalists, Shanina's swift integration into the sniper division marks the beginning of her historic impact. How would her lack of experience measure up against the brutal realities of the Eastern Front? April 1943. Central Women's Sniper Training School, Podolsk. The training regimen was intensive and brief. Soviet sniper schools operated on accelerated schedules, driven by wartime necessity. Standard training lasted approximately 6 months, covering marksmanship fundamentals, fieldcraft, camouflage techniques, range estimation, and tactical employment. Instructors emphasized patience, discipline, and the psychological preparation required for the sniper's solitary role. The primary weapon was the Mosin-Nagant model, 1891/30 rifle, a bolt-action design that had served the Russian military since the late 19th century. The sniper variant featured a Pu telescopic sight with 3.5 times magnification. The rifle fired the 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed cartridge, effective at ranges up to 800 meters in skilled hands. The weapon weighed 4.3 kilograms and measured 1,232 millimeters in length. Its reliability in extreme cold made it ideal for Eastern Front conditions. Training records from the sniper school preserved in Soviet military archives show that Shanina demonstrated exceptional aptitude. She consistently scored in the top tier during marksmanship evaluations. Her instructors noted her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to calculate windage and elevation adjustments quickly. By October 1943, she had completed her training and received her assignment to the 3rd Belarusian Front. Early 1943. The Eastern Front stretched over 2,000 kilometers from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Soviet forces were beginning their westward push after the victories at Stalingrad and Kursk. The 3rd Belarusian Front, commanded by Army General Ivan Chernyakhovsky, operated in the northern sector. Its objectives included the liberation of Belorussia and the eventual push into East Prussia. Shanina arrived at the front in November 1943. She was assigned to the 184th Rifle Division's sniper platoon. Her first impressions, recorded in her diary, reveal the shock of transitioning from training to actual combat. The sound of artillery, the sight of destroyed villages, the smell of burning timber and cordite, the presence of wounded soldiers, all created an overwhelming sensory environment. She wrote that the reality of war exceeded anything she had imagined during training. The conditions on the Eastern Front were extraordinarily harsh. Winter temperatures regularly dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Soldiers lived in dugouts and trenches, often without adequate heating. Supply lines struggled to deliver sufficient food, ammunition, and winter clothing. Frostbite casualties were common. Soviet medical reports document thousands of cold weather injuries during each winter campaign. Snipers faced additional challenges, spending hours motionless in freezing conditions while waiting for targets. Shanina's first confirmed kill came in December 1943 near the town of Vitebsk. Her diary entry from that day is brief but significant. She wrote that pulling the trigger felt different from training. The weight of taking a human life, even an enemy soldier, affected her deeply. However, she also noted her sense of duty and the knowledge that every German soldier eliminated potentially saved Soviet lives. This internal conflict between personal morality and military necessity would characterize her diary entries throughout her service. Although her early experiences were marked by hesitation and uncertainty, Shanina's transformation into a skilled sniper would come at a pivotal moment in the Soviet counteroffensive. What specific tactical changes allowed her to evolve so quickly? January through March 1944, near Vitebsk, Belorussia. Shanina's diary provides extraordinary insight into the mental landscape of a combat sniper. Unlike official military reports that focus on tactical outcomes and casualty statistics, her personal writings reveal the emotional cost of precision killing. The diary, preserved in Soviet archives and partially published in the 1960s, shows a young woman struggling to reconcile her pre-war values with the demands of total war. 1 entry from February 1944 reads, "In translation, I have become a soldier and must do what is necessary." The brevity of this statement belies its significance. Shanina was grappling with the fundamental transformation required of anyone who takes human life systematically. Soviet military psychology research from the period, limited though it was, acknowledged that snipers faced unique psychological pressures compared to regular infantry. The sniper sees the face of the enemy through magnified optics, making the act of killing intensely personal. Despite these psychological burdens, Shanina's combat effectiveness steadily increased. By March 1944, she had recorded 12 confirmed kills. Each kill required verification, typically through observation by a spotter or officer. Soviet sniper doctrine emphasized confirmed kills over claimed kills, maintaining rigorous standards that distinguished actual eliminations from suppressive fire. This verification process, documented in unit combat logs, provides reliable historical evidence of sniper effectiveness. Shanina's tactical approach evolved through experience. Early in her deployment, she operated primarily in defensive positions, targeting German soldiers during attempted advances. As she gained confidence, she began conducting more aggressive reconnaissance missions, moving ahead of Soviet lines to identify and eliminate high-value targets. Her preferred technique involved establishing concealed positions with clear fields of fire, then waiting patiently for officers, machine gunners, or artillery observers to expose themselves. The Mosin-Nagant rifle proved well suited to these tactics. Its bolt-action design enforced shot discipline, preventing the spray-and-pray approach that wasted ammunition and revealed positions. The PU scope's modest magnification actually aided rapid target acquisition at the typical engagement ranges of 200 to 400 meters. Shanina became proficient at estimating range without instruments, using visual cues such as the apparent size of human figures and terrain features. Official Army reports from the 184th Rifle Division praised Shanina's development as a disciplined and skilled marksman. Her company commander's evaluation, dated March 1944, noted her ability to remain calm under fire and her initiative in identifying tactical opportunities. She earned the respect of her comrades and commanders alike. Her growing kill count, along with her ability to adapt to the brutal environment, helped solidify her as a key asset on the battlefield. Yet Shanina's diary continued to reflect inner turmoil. She wrote about dreams where the faces of killed German soldiers appeared. She questioned whether her actions, however militarily justified, would affect her ability to return to normal life after the war. These reflections demonstrate a level of self-awareness and moral sensitivity that contradicts simplified narratives of ideological warriors. Shanina remained fundamentally human despite the dehumanizing nature of her work. Shanina's emotional conflict between duty and personal cost underpins the wider psychological challenges faced by Soviet snipers. How did this mental toll affect the long-term effectiveness of Soviet sniper units? The Soviet sniper program did not emerge fully formed at the war's beginning. Its evolution reflected hard-won tactical lessons and desperate necessity. In 1941 and early 1942, Soviet forces faced catastrophic defeats. German infantry, supported by superior tactics and coordination, repeatedly overwhelmed Soviet defenses. Traditional massed infantry assaults proved suicidal against German machine gun positions and artillery. Soviet military leadership, analyzing these failures, recognized the need for asymmetric responses. Snipers offered a cost-effective method of degrading German combat power. A single well-trained marksman, equipped with a rifle costing minimal resources, could eliminate multiple high-value targets. German officers, identifiable by their distinctive uniforms and binoculars, became priority targets. Machine gun crews, artillery spotters, and radio operators followed. Each elimination disrupted German tactical coordination. The program formalized in 1942. The Soviet Main Directorate of Combat Training established dedicated sniper schools. Curriculum development drew on lessons from the Winter War against Finland, where Finnish snipers had inflicted disproportionate casualties on Soviet forces. Soviet planners studied these tactics and adapted them. The resulting training program emphasized individual initiative, patience, fieldcraft, and psychological resilience. By 1943, the program had produced thousands of trained snipers. Soviet military records document the establishment of sniper companies within rifle divisions. Each company typically contained 20 to 30 snipers organized into two-person teams. The spotter, using binoculars, identified targets and estimated range. The shooter engaged targets based on the spotter's information. This team structure reduced individual psychological burden while improving effectiveness. Tactical employment evolved throughout the war. Initially, snipers operated primarily in defensive positions, covering approaches to Soviet trenches. As Soviet forces transitioned to offensive operations in 1943 and 1944, sniper tactics adapted. Forward reconnaissance missions became common. Snipers infiltrated German rear areas, targeting supply convoys, command posts, and communication nodes. These deep penetration missions required extraordinary courage and skill. The psychological impact of snipers exceeded their numerical casualties. German soldiers learned to fear exposed movement. Officers concealed their rank insignia. Radio operators avoided extended transmissions. Artillery observers worked from covered positions. This behavioral change degraded German operational effectiveness across entire sectors. Soviet after-action reports documented increased German caution and reduced aggressiveness in areas where Soviet snipers operated. Statistics from Soviet military archives reveal the program's scale. By war's end, Soviet snipers had accounted for over 36,000 confirmed German casualties. This figure represents verified kills only. Actual German losses to Soviet snipers likely exceeded this number significantly. The casualty ratio favored the Soviets dramatically. Each sniper eliminated dozens of enemy soldiers while suffering relatively light losses themselves. Equipment production supported the program's expansion. Soviet arms factories manufactured specialized sniper rifles at increasing rates. The Mosin-Nagant sniper variant, with its PU scope, became the standard. Production figures show approximately 53,000 sniper rifles produced during the war years. This represented a small fraction of total rifle production, approximately one sniper rifle per 200 standard infantry rifles, reflecting the specialized nature of the weapon. While the sniper program was expanding, so were German countermeasures. How did Soviet snipers, including Shanina, overcome these evolving challenges? June through August 1944. Vitebsk region, Belorussia. The summer offensive of 1944, known as Operation Bagration, represented the largest Soviet operation of the war. Over 2.3 million Soviet soldiers, supported by 4,000 tanks and 6,000 aircraft, smashed through German Army Group Center. The offensive aimed to liberate Belorussia and create conditions for the subsequent push into Poland and Germany. Shanina's unit, the 184th Rifle Division, participated in the Vitebsk-Orsha offensive operation, a subsidiary component of Bagration. The operation began on June 23, 1944. Soviet forces encircled German forces in Vitebsk, trapping approximately 5 German divisions. The encirclement battle lasted 5 days, resulting in the destruction or capture of over 30,000 German soldiers. During this operation, Shanina demonstrated the tactical skills that would define her reputation. Official Red Army reports from the battle, preserved in the Central Archives of the Ministry of Defense, document her contributions. She operated ahead of advancing Soviet infantry, identifying German strongpoints and eliminating key personnel. Her ability to move independently through contested terrain, establish firing positions quickly, and engage targets effectively proved invaluable. One documented engagement occurred on June 25th. German forces established a defensive position centered on a fortified farmhouse. Machine gun nests covered the approaches, preventing Soviet infantry from advancing. Shanina, working with her spotter, infiltrated to within 300 meters of the position. Over the course of 6 hours, she eliminated the machine gun crew, 2 officers coordinating the defense, and a radio operator. The elimination of these key personnel disrupted German coordination. Soviet infantry subsequently overran the position with minimal casualties. This engagement exemplified effective sniper employment. Rather than engaging random targets, Shanina focused on individuals whose elimination degraded enemy capabilities. The machine gun crew's destruction removed defensive firepower. The officers' deaths disrupted command and control. The radio operator's elimination severed communication with higher headquarters. Each shot served a tactical purpose beyond simple casualty infliction. By August 1944, Shanina's confirmed kill count reached 45. Soviet military regulations required rigorous verification of sniper kills. A neutral observer, typically an officer, had to witness each kill and confirm the target's death. This verification system, while bureaucratic, ensured statistical accuracy. Shanina's 45 confirmed kills represented actual eliminations, not estimates or claims. Her weapon remained the Mosin-Nagant model 1891/30. The rifle's reliability proved essential during intensive combat operations. Unlike more complex weapons, the Mosin-Nagant functioned reliably, even with minimal maintenance. Shanina cleaned and maintained her rifle daily, a ritual she described in her diary as meditative. The weapon became an extension of herself, familiar and trusted. Recognition followed performance. In August 1944, Shanina received the Order of Glory, 3rd class, a decoration established in 1943 specifically for enlisted personnel who demonstrated exceptional courage in combat. The medal came with increased rations and modest monetary compensation. More significantly, it represented official acknowledgement of her contributions. Soviet propaganda would later feature her story, though the full exploitation of her image occurred posthumously. While Shanina's reputation grew, so did the recognition of her work, both from her superiors and Soviet propaganda machinery. But with the increasing importance of snipers, how did the Soviet military adapt to meet the rising demand for their skills? September through November 1944. Eastern Prussia approaches. As Soviet forces pushed westward following Operation Bagration's success, they approached the borders of Germany itself. This phase of the war carried enormous psychological significance. For the first time since Napoleon's invasion, a foreign army threatened German territory. German resistance stiffened accordingly. Civilian population evacuations created massive refugee flows. German military units, fighting now to defend their homeland, demonstrated increased tenacity. The 3rd Belarusian Front, including Shanina's division, participated in preliminary operations aimed at penetrating German border defenses. These battles, fought in October 1944, encountered heavily fortified positions. The Germans had constructed extensive defensive works, including concrete bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, and minefields. Soviet casualties increased sharply. The easy advances of summer gave way to grinding attritional warfare. Shanina's role adapted to these new conditions. Urban and fortified position fighting reduced the effective range for sniper operations. Instead of the open terrain of Belorussia, where engagements occurred at 300 to 500 meters, East Prussian combat took place at closer ranges amid destroyed buildings and defensive works. Shanina adjusted her tactics, focusing on shorter-range precision shooting and closer coordination with infantry assault groups. Her diary entries from this period reflect the campaign's increased intensity. She wrote about the psychological difference between fighting on Soviet or occupied territory versus entering Germany proper. The knowledge that Soviet forces were bringing the war to German soil provided motivation. Simultaneously, German defensive determination created daily close calls and near misses. Several entries mention bullets passing close by, artillery shells landing nearby, and comrades killed or wounded. Despite these dangers, Shanina's effectiveness continued. By November, her confirmed kill count reached 54. This represented an average of approximately 3 confirmed kills per month over 16 months of frontline service. While some Soviet snipers achieved higher totals, particularly those who served longer, Shanina's numbers placed her among the top tier of Soviet marksmen. Only a small percentage of trained snipers achieved comparable results. Soviet propaganda began featuring Shanina more prominently during this period. Her youth, gender, and attractive appearance made her an ideal propaganda subject. Photographs of Shanina, rifle in hand, appeared in Soviet newspapers and magazines. Radio broadcasts described her exploits. This publicity served multiple purposes. It demonstrated Soviet women's contributions to the war effort. It provided heroic role models for both military personnel and civilians. It conveyed to the enemy that even young Soviet women could effectively combat German forces. The propaganda attention created some tensions. Shanina's diary reveals mixed feelings about her public profile. She appreciated the recognition of her service, but felt uncomfortable being singled out when thousands of Soviet soldiers fought and died without acknowledgement. Her writing suggests she viewed herself primarily as a soldier doing her duty, not as a propaganda icon. This modest self-perception appears consistent throughout her diary. Nevertheless, the propaganda served strategic purposes. Soviet information operations aimed to maintain morale during the war's final, brutal phase. Casualties remained high as Soviet forces ground through German defenses. Winter weather compounded combat difficulties. Stories of individual heroism, particularly involving women like Shanina, provided narrative counterweight to casualty lists and material deprivation. As Shanina's image became increasingly utilized by propaganda efforts, the harsh realities of frontline combat continued unabated. How did the physical and psychological toll of continuous operations affect her final weeks of service? December 1944, near Vilkaviškis, Lithuania. The psychological toll of prolonged combat operations manifested in various ways among Soviet soldiers. Soviet military medicine recognized combat fatigue, though terminology and treatment approaches differed from Western practices. Medical officers documented symptoms including sleep disturbances, hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and difficulty concentrating. These symptoms appeared with particular frequency among soldiers in high-stress roles, including snipers. Shanina's diary entries from late 1944 reveal increasing psychological strain. She wrote about persistent nightmares featuring combat scenes and killed German soldiers. Sleep became difficult despite physical exhaustion. Her writing style, previously detailed and reflective, became more fragmented and abbreviated. These changes suggest the cumulative effect of 16 months of frontline service under conditions of constant danger and repetitive trauma exposure. The sniper role imposed unique psychological burdens. Unlike infantrymen who engage targets at distance or in the confusion of close combat, snipers observed their targets through magnified optics before killing them. This intimate view of the enemy as individual human beings, visible in their final moments, created intense psychological pressure. Soviet sniper training included minimal psychological preparation for this aspect of the work. Instructors emphasized tactical and technical skills rather than emotional coping mechanisms. Additional stress came from isolation. Snipers often operated alone or in two-person teams, separated from the social support of larger units. Hours or days passed in solitary observation and waiting. This isolation, combined with constant vigilance requirements, prevented normal social interaction that might buffer combat stress. Shanina's diary entries increasingly expressed feelings of loneliness, despite being surrounded by other soldiers. Soviet medical services maintained limited capacity for treating combat stress. Resources prioritized physical wounds. Soldiers exhibiting psychological symptoms received minimal specialized treatment. The prevailing attitude emphasized willpower and ideological commitment as solutions to stress reactions. This approach reflected both resource limitations and ideological perspectives that viewed psychological difficulties as weakness rather than legitimate medical conditions. Despite these psychological challenges, Shanina continued performing effectively. Her confirmed kill count increased to 59 by early January 1945. This continued effectiveness, despite obvious stress, demonstrates either exceptional resilience or effective personal coping mechanisms. Her diary suggests she found meaning in service to her country and protection of her comrades. This sense of purpose appears to have sustained her through increasingly difficult psychological circumstances. The broader context of Soviet sniper operations reveals similar patterns. Many successful snipers served relatively brief frontline tenures before death, serious wounds, or transfer to training roles. The combination of physical danger and psychological stress made sustained sniper service difficult. Soviet military leadership recognized this pattern but lacked resources to address it systematically. The demands of total war prioritized immediate combat effectiveness over long-term personnel sustainability. Winter conditions compounded all difficulties. Temperatures dropped below -20 degrees Celsius regularly. Maintaining weapon function required constant attention. Frostbite threatened exposed skin within minutes. Simple tasks became exhausting. Soldiers burned enormous calories simply maintaining body temperature. Supply shortages meant inadequate winter clothing and insufficient calories. These physical stresses interacted with psychological pressures, creating compounding effects. Despite the mounting psychological and physical toll, Shanina continued to perform at a high level. How did she maintain her effectiveness as a sniper in the face of such adversity during the war's final brutal winter? January 1945. East Prussia. The final Soviet winter offensive began on January 13, 1945. Marshal Georgy Zhukov's 1st Belarusian Front and Marshal Ivan Chernyakhovsky's 3rd Belarusian Front launched massive coordinated attacks. The strategic objective was to destroy German forces in East Prussia and create conditions for the final assault on Berlin. Over 1.6 million Soviet soldiers participated in this operation, supported by 3,500 tanks and 28,000 artillery pieces. German resistance reached desperate intensity, fighting now on German soil, defending German civilians. Wehrmacht and SS units contested every position. The battles around Königsberg and other East Prussian cities became notoriously savage. Both sides suffered enormous casualties. Soviet after-action reports documented unprecedented German defensive determination. Conversely, German military records described the overwhelming Soviet numerical and material superiority. Shanina's unit, the 184th Rifle Division, fought in the Wilkowicki's-Königsberg operation. This subsidiary component of the larger East Prussian operation aimed to penetrate German defenses west of the Niemen River. The offensive began on January 13th and immediately encountered fierce resistance. German forces had prepared defensive positions extensively, including concrete fortifications, anti-tank obstacles, and interlocking fields of fire. On January 27, 1945, Shanina participated in an assault near the village of Richau in East Prussia. Soviet forces attempted to break through entrenched German positions. The attack began at dawn with artillery preparation. Soviet infantry advanced through snow-covered fields toward German trenches. German defensive fire from machine guns and mortars caused immediate casualties. The assault stalled under heavy fire. Shanina, functioning as part of a reconnaissance and fire support element, moved with the assault troops. Her role involved identifying German strong points and providing precision fire to suppress defensive positions. Soviet combat reports from the engagement indicate she successfully eliminated several German soldiers, including a machine gun crew that had been causing heavy casualties among advancing infantry. During the engagement, German artillery began targeting the advancing Soviet troops. High explosive shells bracketed the attack formations. Shanina sustained severe wounds from shell fragments. The exact circumstances remain unclear from available documentation, but Soviet medical records indicate she received multiple shrapnel wounds to the abdomen and chest. Fellow soldiers carried her to a field medical station approximately 1 kilometer behind the front lines. Soviet military medicine faced overwhelming demands during the final offensive operations. Field hospitals treated thousands of wounded soldiers daily. Medical personnel worked continuous shifts, performing triage, surgery, and basic wound care. Resources remained limited despite improved supply lines. Antibiotics were scarce. Blood transfusions often unavailable. Surgical capacity insufficient for casualty volumes. Many wounded soldiers died from treatable injuries due to resource constraints. Shanina received initial treatment at the field station. Medical officers assessed her wounds as critical. Internal injuries from shell fragments caused severe bleeding. Without immediate surgical intervention, her chances of survival were minimal. However, surgical facilities lay several hours away by ambulance over damaged roads. The medical staff did what they could with available resources, administering pain medication and attempting to stabilize her condition for transport. Roza Shanina died on January 28, 1945, at approximately 1100 hours. She was 20 years, 9 months, and 25 days old. Her final confirmed kill count stood at 59 German soldiers. Her service duration totaled 16 months of frontline combat. These statistics, preserved in Soviet military records, represent a brief but remarkably effective military career. Her death symbolized the broader tragedy of young lives consumed by total war. Following her death, Shanina received posthumous recognition from Soviet authorities. In February 1945, she was awarded the Order of Glory, Second Class. This decoration, following her earlier third-class award, recognized her combat achievements and sacrifice. Soviet military regulations specified that the Order of Glory, awarded in 3 classes, honored enlisted personnel for exceptional courage in combat. Recipients of all 3 classes received recognition equivalent to Hero of the Soviet Union, though Shanina's death prevented her from achieving this distinction. Soviet propaganda utilized Shanina's story extensively in the months following her death. Pravda, the Communist Party newspaper, published a lengthy obituary in early February. The article emphasized her youth, her dedication to defending the motherland, and her effectiveness as a sniper. Photographs of Shanina appeared in military newspapers and magazines throughout the spring of 1945. Radio broadcasts described her exploits to audiences across the Soviet Union. This propaganda served specific purposes during the war's final months. Soviet forces were suffering enormous casualties in the push into Germany. The battles for East Prussia, Pomerania, and Berlin cost hundreds of thousands of Soviet lives. Maintaining morale among soldiers and civilians required constant reinforcement of the war's meaning and necessity. Individual stories of heroism, particularly involving young people like Shanina, provided this reinforcement. Shanina's gender added particular propaganda value. Soviet ideology emphasized women's equality and their contribution to socialist construction. The war provided opportunities to demonstrate these principles practically. Women served throughout the Soviet military, from anti-aircraft units to pilots to snipers. Their service validated Soviet claims about gender equality while simultaneously demonstrating the total nature of Soviet mobilization. Every citizen, regardless of gender, contributed to victory. Post-war, Shanina's story continued circulating. Soviet military histories of the Great Patriotic War included her among notable snipers. Her diary, portions of which were published in the 1960s, provided primary source material for historians and journalists. Schools, youth organizations, and military units studied her example. Streets in several Soviet cities received her name. Her grave, initially marked simply, eventually received a formal monument. However, the propaganda narrative simplified Shanina's actual experience. Official accounts emphasized heroism and dedication while minimizing or ignoring the psychological costs she documented in her diary. The internal conflicts, doubts, and emotional struggles received little attention. Soviet propaganda required uncomplicated heroes, not complex human beings, grappling with war's moral ambiguities. Shanina's actual story, as revealed in her diary, proved more nuanced than the official version. Western awareness of Shanina remained limited during the Cold War. Soviet military history received minimal attention in Western countries. Language barriers prevented access to Russian-language sources. The few Western military analysts who studied Soviet snipers focused primarily on overall tactics and statistics rather than individual stories. Shanina's name appeared occasionally in specialized military history works, but remained largely unknown to broader audiences. The end of the Cold War and subsequent opening of Soviet archives enabled more comprehensive research. Western historians gained access to previously restricted documents, including military records, propaganda materials, and personal papers. Shanina's diary, fully published in Russian, became available to international researchers. This material enabled more accurate and complete understanding of her service and its context. While Shanina's image was used to inspire the Soviet population, her death marked a personal tragedy that transcended propaganda purposes. How did her contribution, and that of Soviet snipers generally, impact the broader war effort and post-war military doctrine? The Soviet sniper program's aggregate impact exceeded the sum of individual contributions. By May 1945, when Germany surrendered, Soviet snipers had eliminated over 36,000 German soldiers in confirmed kills. This figure, derived from Soviet military archives, represents only verified eliminations. Actual German casualties from Soviet sniper fire likely exceeded this number by significant margin, as not all kills received formal verification under combat conditions. These casualties inflicted disproportionate impact on German combat effectiveness. Snipers systematically targeted officers, non-commissioned officers, specialists, and key weapons operators. Each elimination degraded German unit capabilities beyond simple numerical reduction. Killing a company commander disrupted coordination for 150 soldiers. Eliminating a machine gun crew silenced a weapon dominating hundreds of meters of frontage. Targeting artillery observers blinded indirect fire support. German forces developed counter-sniper tactics throughout the war. These included dedicated counter-sniper teams, improved camouflage discipline, and modified tactical procedures to reduce exposure. German military manuals from 1943 onward included specific instructions for operating in sniper-threatened environments. Officers concealed rank insignia. Radio operators minimized transmission times. Artillery observers worked from covered positions. These adaptations represented implicit acknowledgement of Soviet sniper effectiveness. The psychological impact proved equally significant. German soldiers learned to fear exposed movement. The knowledge that an unseen marksman might be observing through a telescopic sight created constant tension. This psychological pressure affected decision-making, reduced aggressiveness, and degraded overall combat effectiveness. Soviet after-action reports documented increased German caution in sectors where sniper activity was high. Cost-effectiveness analysis demonstrates the program's efficiency. A trained sniper equipped with a rifle costing approximately 300 rubles in contemporary Soviet currency could eliminate dozens of enemy soldiers over a service career. Each enemy soldier represented Germany's investment in recruitment, training, equipment, and sustainment. The exchange ratio heavily favored the Soviets. Investment of modest resources in sniper training and equipment yielded substantial returns in enemy casualties and degraded capabilities. The program influenced post-war Soviet military doctrine. The demonstrated effectiveness of snipers ensured their continued integration into Soviet force structure. Cold War-era Soviet military organization included dedicated sniper positions within motorized rifle companies. Training infrastructure established during World War II continued operating. Lessons learned regarding equipment, tactics, and employment methods were preserved and refined. International military establishments studied Soviet sniper employment. Western armies, recognizing the tactical advantages demonstrated during World War II, developed their own enhanced sniper programs. The United States Marine Corps, for example, expanded its sniper training and integration following analysis of Soviet experiences. British and German military establishments similarly incorporated lessons regarding sniper employment. The role of women snipers specifically generated particular interest. The Soviet Union represented the only major combatant to employ women snipers in significant numbers during World War II. Approximately 2,000 women completed Soviet sniper training during the war. Their collective performance validated the concept of female combat personnel in this specialized role. Post-war debates regarding women in combat frequently referenced Soviet sniper programs as practical demonstration of female combat effectiveness. Soviet snipers played a critical role in the outcome of World War II. How did their tactical and psychological success influence future warfare tactics and strategies across the world's militaries? Roza Shanina was buried initially in a military cemetery near the location of her death in East Prussia. The grave, like thousands of others, received a simple wooden marker with her name, rank, and dates. The chaos of war's final months prevented elaborate memorial ceremonies. Her unit continued fighting toward Berlin. Her family in distant Arkhangelsk received official notification of her death weeks later through standard military channels. Post-war, Soviet authorities organized efforts to identify and memorialize war dead. Special military units searched former battlefields, located graves, and established permanent memorials. Shanina's remains were eventually relocated to a formal military cemetery. A proper gravestone replaced the wooden marker. The inscription identified her as Senior Sergeant Roza Shanina, Sniper, Hero of the Soviet Union, though the latter designation was technically inaccurate as she received the Order of Glory, not the hero title. Her hometown of Edma erected a memorial in the local school. The memorial, consisting of a plaque with her photograph and biographical information, served as focal point for patriotic education. School children studied her example during history lessons. Youth organizations used her story to illustrate Soviet values of duty, courage, and sacrifice. The school eventually received her name, becoming Edma Secondary School, named after Roza Shanina. Archival preservation ensured her story's survival for historical research. Her diary, preserved through unknown circumstances during wartime chaos, eventually reached Soviet military archives. The document's survival proved fortunate, as most personal papers from frontline soldiers were lost. The diary provided primary source material for historians studying Soviet sniper operations and women's military service. Portions were published in Soviet magazines during the 1960s, introducing her story to broader audiences. Contemporary recognition of Shanina's service continues. Modern Russian Federation authorities maintain the Soviet tradition of honoring great patriotic war veterans and casualties. Ceremonies marking anniversaries of major battles include mentions of significant participants, sometimes including Shanina. Military history museums in Russia feature exhibits about sniper warfare that reference her among other notable marksmen. International awareness has grown in recent decades. English-language publications about Soviet snipers increasingly include Shanina's story. Documentary films and historical books examining women's military service discuss her career. Academic research into gender and warfare analyzes Soviet women snipers, with Shanina frequently cited as primary example. This growing international recognition contrasts with her relative obscurity during the Cold War decades. Her legacy extends beyond individual recognition. Shanina represents the approximately 34 million Soviet citizens, military and civilian, who died during World War II. Each individual story, including hers, reflects broader patterns of sacrifice, suffering, and resilience. The Soviet Union's victory came at enormous human cost. Cities destroyed, families shattered, generations decimated. Individual stories like Shanina's personalize these otherwise incomprehensible statistics. The questions her story raises remain relevant. What transforms ordinary civilians into effective combat soldiers? How do individuals maintain moral sensibility while performing lethal duties? What psychological costs accompany combat service? How should societies remember and honor those who serve? These questions transcend specific historical contexts, applying to all conflicts and all participants. Shanina's diary provides particularly valuable perspective. Unlike propaganda accounts emphasizing heroism and ideological commitment, her personal writings reveal complexity, doubt, and internal conflict alongside dedication and courage. This authentic human voice, preserved by chance through wartime chaos, offers insight unavailable from official sources. Her words remind readers that soldiers remain human beings, not abstract symbols or propaganda figures. Soviet military analysis following World War II systematically evaluated tactical innovations and their contributions to victory. Sniper warfare received particular attention. Soviet General Staff studies examined casualty data, tactical employment methods, training effectiveness, and cost-benefit ratios. These analyses, classified during the Soviet period and partially declassified afterward, demonstrate military recognition of the sniper program's strategic value. The statistical evidence proved compelling. Soviet snipers achieved over 36,000 confirmed kills while suffering relatively modest casualties themselves. The kill ratio comparing sniper eliminations to sniper losses heavily favored the Soviets. Each trained sniper represented a small investment in equipment and training that yielded substantial returns in enemy casualties and degraded enemy capabilities. This cost-effectiveness made sniper integration into standard force structure an obvious decision. Cold War Soviet military organization reflected these conclusions. Motorized rifle companies included dedicated sniper positions. Division-level sniper platoons provided specialized capabilities for reconnaissance and precision engagement. Training infrastructure established during World War II continued operating, producing thousands of trained snipers for peacetime Army and reserves. Equipment development continued, with improved rifles and optics entering service during subsequent decades. The role of women in Soviet military service evolved after the war. While massive wartime mobilization of women ended with demobilization in 1945 and 1946, the precedent of women's combat service influenced subsequent policies. Soviet military doctrine acknowledged women's capability for military service, though peacetime employment remained limited primarily to support roles. The memory of wartime women snipers, pilots, and tank crews persisted in Soviet military culture. International military establishments observed Soviet sniper employment with interest. NATO military planners, anticipating potential conflict with Warsaw Pact forces, studied Soviet tactical methods, including sniper employment. Western armies expanded their own sniper programs in response. The United States Army and Marine Corps developed enhanced sniper training curricula. British forces refined their sniper doctrine. These developments reflected recognition that Soviet innovations in sniper warfare established new tactical standards. Technological developments enhanced sniper capabilities throughout the Cold War and beyond. Improved optical sights, better ammunition, and more accurate rifles increased effective engagement ranges. Night vision technology enabled 24-hour operations. Modern communication systems improved coordination between snipers and supported units. These technological advances built upon tactical foundations established during the World War II, including Soviet innovations. The strategic impact of precision warfare expanded beyond traditional sniper roles. Guided munitions, precision artillery, and airborne targeting systems applied sniper principles at longer ranges and larger scales. The fundamental concept, identifying and eliminating specific high-value targets rather than delivering area fire, proved applicable across multiple domains. Modern military doctrine emphasizes precision engagement as central operational principle, reflecting lessons first systematically applied by Soviet snipers during World War II. Historical memory of Soviet sniper operations remains significant in Russian military culture. Modern Russian armed forces maintain robust sniper programs, training thousands of specialized marksmen. These programs explicitly reference World War II precedents. Training materials include historical examples, sometimes featuring individuals like Shanina. This historical continuity demonstrates how wartime innovations became permanent features of military organization and doctrine. Roza Shanina's life spanned 20 years, 9 months, and 25 days. Her military service lasted 16 months. She eliminated 59 enemy soldiers in documented engagements. These numbers, precise and verifiable, measure one individual's contribution to the largest conflict in human history. They represent tactical effectiveness but cannot capture the human reality behind the statistics. Her story illuminates broader patterns. The Soviet Union mobilized every available resource for survival and victory. Approximately 34 million Soviet citizens died during the war, roughly half military personnel and half civilians. This death toll exceeded all other combatants combined. Victory came at costs almost incomprehensible in scale. Individual stories like Shanina's provide human dimension to otherwise abstract statistics. The Soviet sniper program represented systematic application of limited resources to achieve maximum effect. Rather than matching German tactical sophistication or technological advantages directly, Soviet military leadership identified asymmetric approaches that leveraged available strengths. Precision marksmanship, requiring minimal equipment but intensive training, proved ideal. The program's success demonstrated that tactical innovation could partially offset material and organizational disadvantages. Shanina's gender adds additional dimension. Soviet ideology emphasized gender equality, and wartime necessity required mobilization of all citizens, regardless of gender. Approximately 800,000 Soviet women served in military roles during World War II, including approximately 2,000 trained snipers. Their service validated ideological claims while meeting practical military requirements. Post-war debates regarding women in combat frequently referenced Soviet experiences as practical demonstration of capability. Her diary provides insight unavailable from official sources. Military records document tactical actions and outcomes. Propaganda emphasizes heroism and ideological commitment. Shanina's personal writings reveal internal conflict, moral questioning, and psychological cost alongside dedication and courage. This authentic voice reminds readers that soldiers remain complex human beings, not simplified symbols or propaganda figures. The preservation of her story illustrates the importance of historical memory. World War II recedes into history as surviving participants age and die. Direct testimony becomes increasingly rare. Documentary evidence, including diaries like Shanina's, grows more valuable as living memory fades. Historians face responsibility to preserve and accurately interpret these sources for future generations. Museums in Russia and internationally display artifacts from the war, including sniper rifles, uniforms, and personal items. These physical objects connect contemporary viewers to historical reality. A Mosin-Nagant rifle, similar to the weapon Shanina carried, rests in display cases. The rifle's weight, approximately 4.3 kilograms, can be felt. Its length, 1,232 millimeters, can be measured. The mechanical action can be examined. These tangible connections ground abstract historical narratives in physical reality. Educational institutions continue teaching her story. Schools in Russia include World War II history in standard curriculum. Shanina appears among examples of youth contribution to victory. Students examine her diary entries, discuss her decisions, and consider the ethical questions her service raises. This pedagogical use ensures her story reaches new generations, maintaining continuity of historical memory. The questions her life and service raise transcend specific historical context. How do ordinary people respond to existential threats? What enables individuals to perform extraordinarily difficult duties? What psychological costs accompany combat service? How should societies remember and honor those who serve and sacrifice? These universal questions apply across conflicts and cultures, making individual stories like Shanina's relevant beyond their immediate historical context. The legacy of Soviet sniper operations extends into contemporary military doctrine worldwide. Modern armies maintain robust sniper programs, training specialized marksmen for precision engagement missions. These programs trace lineage to World War II innovations, including Soviet developments. Shanina's service, and that of thousands of other Soviet snipers, established tactical precedents still relevant 8 decades later. Roza Shanina remains a figure of historical significance, not because her 59 confirmed kills changed the war's outcome alone, but because her story exemplifies broader patterns of sacrifice, innovation, and resilience. Her brief life, documented through official records and personal writings, provides window into the human experience of total war. Her legacy persists in military doctrine, historical memory, and continued examination of the costs of conflict.